Hey guys, it's MiracleMAX here. To say that I have a backlog of DVD players, Blu-ray players, CD players, home entertainment systems is an understatement. Check out some of the ones behind me. They just keep piling up, literally. Today I'm going to have a look at the LG that's on the bottom of the pile. Let's have a look at it, see if we can fix it. I must admit we don't see these too often, but this is actually a 2014 model, so it's about 3 years old, where they have the combination of the VCR together with the DVD player. Let's have a look at what model it is. As you can see, we're looking at an LG unit. The model number is RC689D. So what's its problem? Let's have a look. So when I turn it on, we have our standby reading, as you can see. And we actually turn the player on, it comes up with hello, which is fantastic. But the problem is, then it starts to scroll, and then it starts to scroll, and then it starts to scroll, and that's as far as it gets. Now I've looked online with regard to this problem. Some people are talking about firmware issues, etc., etc. But I thought, another issue too is that they have a disc actually stuck in the DVD player. They played it, not an issue, and then all of a sudden, late at night, it decided to come on by itself and it just keeps scrolling, and you physically can't get the disc to come out regardless of how often you press the button. So I thought about firmware updating, but before I did that I thought, well, perhaps I should try and get the disc out at least. That's the main thing for the customer. But visually inspecting it, of course, is an important part of diagnostics. So let's have a look around and see if you can see what I've seen. You can hear the disc wants to fire up, but we're continually going through this startup procedure, and the disc obviously is not spitting out or even starting up. Regardless of, even if I try and hit the play button or eject button, it won't do anything. You can see the laser head moving in and out trying to read the disc, and the disc is spinning up okay, but obviously something's not right there. I'm not sure if that's part of the problem with the booting process, but there are other things that I have noted. If we zoom in a little bit on some of those capacitors, you can see that the tops are bulged, and it's more than one. This one clearly is bulged. I did see, there's one in behind here that you probably can't see, but this one here is clearly bulged. Whether this is part of the problem with the starting up process, I need to pull that board apart and check the ESR on those capacitors. So I'm going to start removing the DVD drive itself. Off to the side, I've undone it already, of course, and it's a matter of picking it up and carefully taking it to one side. Then I've got to remove all these connectors here, here and here, or off the board here, here and here. Then I can put it to one side, and hopefully I can get the disc out at least. That's a priority to the customer at this stage. The disc doesn't belong to them, it belongs to someone else. After undoing an extra set of screws here and over the other side, the top simply pulls off once you get past the warranty sticker, of course, and we'll pop him to one side, and we can remove our Colombo disc. Good series, I must admit. Of course, those capacitors in the power supply need to be replaced. They're bulged, and therefore the ESR will be higher, and they'll fail eventually. But might be interesting to put it back together, perhaps even before I do anything else, just to see if that's made any difference at all. So despite powering it up again without the DVD player installed, and as you can see, I've got Colombo out, the player is still going through that initial loop. In view of that, I'm going to check these capacitors and see what their ESR is, and perhaps replace them simply because they are bulged. I might even do the whole set. What I might do is check the output power, which is going down underneath. It's a little bit difficult to get to. I don't have schematics, so I'm not exactly sure what the voltages should be at this point in time, but I should be able to have, I should at least have 5 volt standby, some 12 volts maybe, a couple of 5s and a good earth. And I suspect some of those voltages aren't up to scratch, and that's why it's not booting up. After pulling off my HDMI board, putting that to one side, although I don't have schematics for this particular player, on the secondary side of the power board I do have some outputs here, so I'll check those now and see if they're up to scratch. If not, that might be why the DVD player is not kicking in and it's not booting up, because we're not getting the correct voltages. If we zoom in a little bit closer, you should be able to see the voltages written there. I don't know how much closer I can get and still stay in focus. That should do us. Okay, now this is going to be a little hard to work around the camera, etc., but I'll try and do what I can. I'll read out the voltages as I go. This should be 5.3. It's okay. That should be a ground, so that should go to Zipoid. I'm not sure what this is meant to be. There's no actual writing on it. That's 14 volts there. This should be 13.5. A little bit high. Next one should be a ground. This should be 14. 14.6.5 is a little high. This should be 3, I believe. Sorry, 34 it should be. Once again, that's 35, that's pretty high. A ground. Don't know what this is meant to say, I can't see it. 5.2, there's no writing on that one. 3.3, we're down 0.3 of a volt there. This should be 2.5. It's definitely low. 5 volts, correct. And 12 volts. That's correct there. So as you can see, we're down a few volts, aren't we, in various outputs in our secondary side of things. So I need to replace those capacitors, check the others, and make sure that all my voltages are consistent with what they're meant to be. Maybe that's why it's not firing up. Even though I've had this power board off for a little while, gives you an idea of the voltages that are still created in there or held within there by that filter capacitor. So I've got 14 volts there. I haven't drained the capacitor at all at the moment, but this has been off for quite some time. You can see it's holding the voltage no problem, slowly draining back, but you have to be super careful with these guys. So the best thing you can do is drain it. I've made up this particular tool, which is just got two 680 resistors in series, and if I just put it across that, it should, given a little bit of time, should drain it away to nothing so that it's safe to use. We'll just check it again, and we should have pretty close to nothing. We're into the millivolt range now, aren't we? Okay, it's now safe to pull apart and replace those capacitors or check those capacitors. I've got my blue ESR meter out, works really well. What I'm going to do is check these couple of capacitors here and here, just see what their resistance is, their series resistance. I've checked a lot of the diodes, they seem to be okay, I'm not concerned about that. It's these two capacitors here that are my main concern. Now you can get a value chart that will give you an idea of what the ratings are. There is a little bit of a discrepancy with some people about what they feel is correct and incorrect, but fortunately I happen to have some other capacitors with the same rating, so all I've got to do is compare those apples for apples basically. So let's have a look at this one here. This one is a 16 volt by 2200 microfarad. So if I flip him over and test it there, it says, what's that, 2.9 ohms. According to my chart here, now I set 16 to my 16 volts. Now I don't have 2200 ohms, but according to this, if I was to double that, it should be 0.05 pretty much, something along those lines. But we're certainly not seeing that, are we? So it's miles too high in the resistance reading. Now let's just compare that with another one. That's this one over here, which is exactly the same rating. Just see how that compares compared to the other fella. And we are getting 0.06. You can clearly see that other one's absolutely knackered. Once again, we'll check this fella here. That's the one that's bulged. Just make sure I'm checking the right one. And our reading there is 6.9. And that one was 10 volts, 1000 microfarad. According to our chart here, 10 volts, 1000 microfarad should be 0.1. So these are totally had it. They need to be replaced. So after testing all the capacitors, including the main filter capacitor, which is up here, that one's in really good condition, but anything that's got a black dot on it are the ones that are faulty and that need to be replaced. As you can see, there's quite a few of them, so I better get my act together and change them over and see if that creates the voltages that we need to get this thing booted and up and running. Just remove the capacitor from this point here, 16 volt, 100 microfarad. Now, rather than replacing it with another 100 microfarad 16 volt, it's a good idea, stick with the same capacitance of course. So at this point in time I'm going with 100 microfarad, but I'm going up to 25 volt. This is good practice wherever possible to replace the capacitors with a higher voltage than the original rating was, and that will give it more of an opportunity to perform better. Okay, so let's check those voltages again and see if they're within range. 3.3 there should be. Sorry, 5.3. 5.3 that is. This one here, not sure, doesn't tell me. 13.8. 13.5 this should be. Yeah, there we go, within range. Ground. Okay, good. 14 volts. 14.3. 34 volts, sorry. 34, 35. Ground. Not sure, it doesn't tell me. 5.23. 3.3. Perfect. Another ground. That's actually got a loose terminal there. Quite a loose terminal. That's interesting, I'll have to check that. This one is 2.5, good. 5 volts, good. And 12 volts by the looks, yeah, okay. So much better, but I tell you what, some of these terminals, hey, a bit loose. Might have to just, that ground one in particular, very dodgy. Not sure if you can see it, I might just have to zoom in for that one for you. I'll turn the power off in the meantime. So I don't know how many of these terminals are a bit on the dodgy side, check it out. They're a bit wobbly. There's one in particular that I wasn't happy with, it was an earth one. I think that's it there. Excuse the TV in the background, kids are going a bit nuts. As you can see, they're a little bit loose. I might just tighten up some of those terminals so that we've got good continuity between the terminal post and the connector itself. But I'm happy with those voltages, and hopefully that will bring the whole thing back to life. So as they say, moment of truth. I haven't got the cover on as yet, but the DVD player is back in position. Power board is back where it belongs. Everything's all connected. So let's turn on the power at the isolation transformer. And we've got our standby there, which is good. I will turn him on, see what it does. That hello introduction has come up. But notice it's not scrolling across, it's staying there stabilised, which is good. DVD read. Now I haven't got a disc in there at the moment. I just want to see if it's going to be stable, which it is. Obviously, because of all those voltages being all over the shop, it didn't allow it to boot up correctly. So that's a good sign. Next thing I'll do is I'll take it out to the TV, hook it up and make sure that we can actually get the DVD player to work. I don't have a VCR cassette, so I can't test that. I'll get the customer to check that later on.
Don't worry, our day's coming.
Okay, just running it through its test procedure now. got the DVD up and running, no problems. You can see the counter on the DVD working, and also just checking, making sure that the remote works as well. That's important. Just put it through its paces. It's scanning, playing. That's okay. Pausing, etc. All the features seem to work on it okay. So I'm pretty happy. I'll let it run for a bit longer, of course, to make sure that it's sorted. If there's any heating issues, want to make sure that it lasts the distance. But apart from that, I'm pretty happy. I'm convinced that I've got it sorted. Well, that's another one off the pile. A successful repair, if I say so myself. I'm happy with the results on this. After a lot of research, it seemed to indicate that it might be a firmware issue. But then I realised these customers don't use the internet on this particular appliance. In line with my motto, making the complex simple, I decided to start with the obvious first, a visual, a very good visual. After that, testing the voltages clearly showed that there was a problem in the power supply. Finding those bulging capacitors was a dead giveaway. It's not unusual on these switch mode power supplies to find that. All in all, I found 6 capacitors that needed replacement. I'll give these to the customer to show what has been replaced. It's always good to show the customer the work that you've done, if at all possible. Well guys, thanks very much for watching this video. I hope you've learnt something. As usual, I have as well. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and feel free to comment down below. So until next time, this is MiracleMAX signing off. Catch you later guys.